Um, okay,
Cool.
I'm gonna operate as though we're on. We're joined this hour by Ken Arkind, who is a legend of the slam scene and poetry. Just incredible ambassador of spoken word. Um, his resume goes on and on and on. I'm really excited to have him for this hour. So, Ken, can you please take it away with the poem?
Oh, wait, right off the bat.
Hell
Uh,
yeah!
okay. Half a second. Let me. All right. Uh,
I caught Ken off guard. That's my bad.
yeah, you really did. I didn't know that's what was up. I have to find one. Thank you for having me on, Matt. It's really nice. I'm a big fan of all the things you post, even the ones that make other people angry. I think it's fantastic. Uh, great. You're lucky because I've actually been doing like a private 15-15 with my friend Mohammed Hassan, who's a New Zealand Poetry Slam champion and an amazing journalist and a really awesome dude. So we've been kind of trying to push each other. So uh, this is a poem about lockdown in New Zealand, actually. Cool. Even at 11 a.m., the streets of Auckland are a mute tongue drenched in midnight. A quiet moon shadow, no cars, no chatter. Dominion Road feels like sitting inside of an empty vein. So still, you can feel the judgmental eyes of Mongofo following you down abandoned streets. At night, the helicopters scream across the sky, and I wonder if this how fish feel. This is how must feel watching motorboats tear over the surface of the water. We are all mice, braving the house as the humans sleep, scavenging for the last of the Vogel's bread and mi goreng, doing our best to avoid the sounds of our own heads in the new state-sanctioned tranquility. But after the traffic and the pub fights died off, it wasn't the bird song that I first noticed. It wasn't the far-off rush of ocean waves. It was the wind. The world was so silent I could hear the wind sigh. I never knew the air could make that much noise. How alive it could be when given the freedom. It rushes past me on Valley Road like a pack of school kids whispering secrets they don't want a teacher to hear. You can feel its excitement, how it's relearning its own power, running fingers through leaves, giggling across unmowed grass. For the first time, and Lord knows how long, it doesn't have to scream to be heard, doesn't have to throw a fit or cause a scene to be noticed, no tornadoes, no sudden gusts, doesn't have to blow up skirts or knock down trees. It suddenly has our attention. What then will it say when it remembers its own voice, when it remembers its own power? What songs will the ghosts of the world we left behind have to sing for us now that we can only listen? Yeah.
Sending work as always. So today Ken is joining us from New Zealand, and we're going to get how that came to be. But first, Ken, you came to kind of national prominence in the United States as a kind of a slam champion or as a poet in Denver, Colorado. Can you tell us about the poetry scene in Denver?
Yeah. I started going to open mics when I was about 17, and it was at the Mercury Cafe, which is like an amazing space. I would really like to actually give a shout out to the Mercury Cafe right now because like a lot of other like kind of old school restaurants and cultural institutions in other cities right now, it's trying its best to stay afloat. They actually have a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter going on for them right now, and if people in Denver would be happy to donate, maybe I can send you the link or something. I
Yeah,
don't
we'll
know.
drop the link in the comments.
Cool. Yeah, it's an amazing place. This incredible woman named Marilyn McGinnity has run it for about 40 years, and it was kind of like the only place that like back in the day, like metal bands or punk bands or hip hop groups could play in Denver when it was a lot more conservative. And she ran it in several different locations, and most of 50% of it is powered by solar and wind, and she's been doing that for a long time. Almost an anarchist business model where everybody gets paid out in a very similar amount. Like an incredible place that I highly recommend. But yeah, so like a lot of places, they're struggling right now. But because a lot of people that can't find their voice in other places find their voice there, I wound up when I was 17, and we went. So my friends and I were working at a Dairy Queen in Aurora, Colorado, um, and our friend Erin Johnson actually drove us out to the Merc because she wanted to go swing dancing. And then we went up there and she said, "Hey, they do that poetry stuff that you like downstairs." And of course I was miserable and had no desire to dance because I thought I was too punk rock for that. And then I went downstairs and the open mic had ended, but I figured out where it was. And so the next weekend I showed up. It was the open mics used to be on Friday nights at 10 o'clock and the slams were on Sundays. And nobody used to show up to the slams. So I thought the slams were stupid. I had no desire to be a part of it whatsoever. But the open mic was amazing. And there were all these old guys that were like remnants to the beats. You know what I mean? So the guys from the out from your way, actually, from the the Venice Beach poets. So Tony Sabella, Stuart Z. Perkoff, all these guys came from out there and headed over to Denver and kind of started a Black Ace Books and like this kind of like open mic scene. And then a lot of them ended up going back or passing away. And I was very fortunate to be friends with Tony Sabella before he passed. If you go down to one of the by the basketball courts in Venice Beach, they have this marble section where the showers are, and they have poems carved into the marble. And they got one from Charles Bukowski, I think other ones like Ellen Mabee, Frank T. Rios, and one's Tony Sabella. So every time I get to go to LA, I always make a point to stop by Tony and say hello.
Did you ever get a chance to perform at Beyond Baroque?
Did I ever at Beyond Baroque? Is that the one that's in California?
That's in Venice. Beyond Baroque is where Perkoff and all of them.
Oh, they used to hang out, eh? That was their spot.
They did poetry. You're talking about coming out from LA. That was Beyond Baroque is kind of Ellen Mabee. She runs the bookstore now.
Yeah.
She used to run the bookstore for a minute. I'm not sure if she's still running the bookstore, but Ellen Mabee is a Beyond Baroque teacher, and
cool.
Oh, so that's where if you ever get back to LA, I'm actually on the curatorial board now at Beyond Baroque. I'll nice. The whole thing up.
Oh, that's huge. That has is that all connected to like Temple of Man and all that stuff a little bit? Like
I think there was something right out there now. I mean, now it's run by Quinn Ring. It was for years. Okay. It was run by Richard Madonia, but now it's Quinn. And I'm part of the curatorial board, so I'm responsible. I mean, right now I'm not doing anything, but like I'm responsible to put on some shows. So if you're ever back in LA and we're traveling again,
it out. Yeah. Good to know. That's awesome. That's a cool turnaround. Yeah, I had a lot of respect for all that. And that, there's also other guys that used to read there, like Lenny Trinilla, who's like a Denver legend, if anybody's ever heard of him. And a lot of people have heard of Lenny, but just shout out to the guy. Passed away in 2015. And then I think about Trinidad Sanchez Jr. used to read there too, which is an amazing guy, hugely influential dude. Originally from Texas, and then moved up to Colorado. But yeah, it was cool. So I used to see all these old guys and just thought like the open mic was like the coolest thing. And that's where my life ended and began was, I'd do my week and then I'd show up on Friday nights and I'd go and I'd sit in the back and I'd watch these guys. And then I finally got enough guts to read. And my friends used to ask me to read poems at parties and stuff when I was in high school. Like they're like, go do that yelling thing. And I just do my best Dennis Leary impression. I thought it was clever, But yeah, so getting up in front of a group of people was very different, but I'm glad I did it. And so I kind of like incubated in that space, got really into making zines, lived in downtown Denver, became friends with people, but I never really liked the slam until I saw the send off for the team in 2002 and saw a group piece, which I had never seen before. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And so I borrowed $100 from my old boss, hopped in a car with Andrea Gibson's partner at the time. And because they were looking for an extra person to go with them. There was like a car full of people. And so I put gas money in and I slept on the team's floor and I saw the National Poetry Slam and I listened to 2,000 people watch one person read a poem. And everybody seemed like way too cool and rock starry and everything like that. And I'm like, well, this is cool, but I don't think I actually fit in. Like, I'd never be on Def Jam or anything like that. And then I saw a guy named David Blair from Detroit. And David had, a godlike voice. But when he came out on stage, he was just this normal looking dude, with kind of a sad smile. But the sweetest story, I read this poem called Behind the Garage, and it just changed everything for me. And I was like, yo, if he can do that, because they tied for first that year with Urbana, I believe. And I was like, yo, if they can do this, then I can do that. And then a month later, I ended up, because I had done some open mic stuff in Arizona, I got asked to do like my first out of town feature. And I get there and the day before I go, David and a bunch of other poets from Detroit had come through. And at the time I just called him Blair because that was the stage name. And I just came up to him and I'm like, man, can you sign my book? You're the whole reason why I started doing poetry. I remember Paulie Littman, who I think you had on the show a couple of days ago, was standing behind me being like, yeah, you're actually his favorite poet. He loves you. You know what I mean? Because I'd started slamming at that point and kind of become part of the scene. And so it was really cool. And then, so the next day I fly to Arizona to do these shows and I'm looking at the back of the chapbook that I bought from the tour from Detroit. And it turns out I'm double booked with them, the Detroit people and myself, on several days. And I remember being like totally nervous because I was like, I guess this is a bit of a side story, but I just want to talk about how cool David Blair is for half a second. And so I was like double booked with him.
I met David Blair in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Florida for the
oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I mean, he was an incredible man. I mean, spend as much time you want talking about David.
Yeah, he was really super sweet guy. You know what I mean? And totally his presence betrayed his accomplishments, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? He never put anybody else in the space where he was more than, or you know what I mean, or even he was just present constantly. And so I remember I came to their open mic before my show because I had a couple of days before. I arrived early, and I said, "Hey, check this situation out." I remember I walked up to him and he's like, "Didn't I just see you in Denver?" I'm like, "Yeah, you didn't sign my book." I thought it was the funniest joke. And he was like, "Yeah." So we figured it out. And he's like, "Well, we'll figure out the dates when they happen." And I remember the first place, oddly enough, was like, which was the Willow House, was like, "Yo, we're not gonna put David on because I didn't agree to it. That was someone else agreed to book him, and I'm gonna put you on." And I'm like, "He's a national poetry slam champion. Why wouldn't you put him on?" Like, I'm like, "I'll do the show with him. I won't do the show without him. It's a weird thing." And so I did that. And then the next night it was the opposite. It was the Tempe Slam, and they didn't want, or the Mesa Slam or whatever, and they didn't want to put me on at all. And David was like, "No, he goes on. He, with us." And I remember that moment of feeling like really kind of welcomed in a big way. So it really inspired me to keep slamming. And then, so I made my first team that next year. And there was a bit of advice from someone once, because I'm really into the local scene and what you can do for your local scene. I think when I started making a living off of poetry, a lot of people asked me what you do. And I think a lot of other people have probably much more sound advice. But my thing off the top of my head was build your local scene, preserve your history, make a good name for yourself, book other people from out of town, help other poets. And over time, if you keep working at your poetry, hopefully you get noticed or you do well enough in an open space that it works. And that's not to, and I think that's probably also in some ways kind of a privileged stance to take, because I can sit back and say, I'll be fine and just rely on my own thing. I never had to hustle the way I guess I did hustle, but I just hustled in a very different way. But I think other people are like, "Yo, I want to put my name out and I'm going to put and I'm going to advertise myself and I'm going to push myself." And I think sometimes people get down on that. And I'm like, no, do what you got to do to put yourself out there, whatever's going to work for you. But for me, what I did is I worked on my local scene and I really cared about that. And one guy gave me this advice back in the day. He's like, the thing that you need to be worried about, the best thing to do at the National Poetry Slam is not always be the team that wins, but what a good goal for you to have is to know that your local scene is strong enough that when other scenes see the draw of who they got to compete against, they can say, "Oh, we got Denver. We're going to have a tough bout." And if you can put a name out for yourself like that, regardless of who's on the team, then that's something special. You know what I mean? And so that's what my goal was. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that first, or it's probably the second wave, definitely the second wave of Denver Slam is when I came in. And I think all of us kind of had that goal, because some of them were left over from the first wave, like Ian Doherty, Andrea Gibson, Polly Littman, Katie Worsing. Well, Katie Worsing and I were definitely like second wave. And then we really kind of got into this idea of like, that's what we want to do. We want to be competitive enough that people are interested and know we're going to bring good work, right?
When would you say the second wave began for the Mercury?
2003. 2003. So there was the first year. There was actually a team from 1995 that people forget actually Denver sent a team. And I don't know. I know a couple of those guys maybe in passing, but it wasn't until 2000. I think 2000 was the first year there was a team. 2001 was the second year, and 2003. And those people all traded back and forth. It was like, with the exception of one poet named Andrea Moore, who was the first city champion, it was always like Paulie, Seth, Ian, Andrea, Kate Mackay, right? And then they went back and forth for like 3 years. Then in 2003, Katie Worsing and I, and a bunch of other poets started competing, but Katie and Worsing and I were the first ones to make the team. And then in 2004, and then Aaron Bradley moved to town and from the Phoenix area. And then in 2005, that was the first year that things kind of switched up. So that year, Panama, Soweto, and KDFS made the team. And so that was the team, was myself, Panama, KDFS, Ian, and Paulie. And the next year was officially like the third wave. That's where things really changed. And that was the first year we won the National Poetry Slam, was 2006.
And that year was 2006.
2006. Yeah. And so that was that team was Isis, aka Ebony Booth, was our city champion. Jen Rinaldi and I, Panama, Katie Worsing. We had two alternates. Both Paulie and Bianca tied for alternate that year. So it was like an amazing squad. And Ted Vaca came on as our coach. And Ted was the champion with the 1995 Asheville team that helped found the Denver Slam back in the day. He's originally from California.
Yeah. So 2006. So through like 2006 to I don't know when. I mean, I slammed for maybe like 2-3 years. But like I remember that Denver was like this big powerhouse. This was like the Denver team, Denver. I mean, by the time I was slamming, Nuba had come into being. So there was like these two scary Denver teams, not just one. So that was kind of what I remember from those days.
Which was exciting, Yeah, it was cool. We went back when I went back and visited for Christmas this year. You know, I did like an interview with a bunch of. I just did like a podcast in my friend's store's basement at Mutiny Book and Information Cafe. Another amazing Denver business. You get independent business. Everybody should support. But yeah, we did this thing, and it was cool to have all these old school heads in the room to talk about Poetry Slam and all the things we had done. Like Theo was there, Susie Q, all that stuff, and to kind of have a big, serious conversation about recognizing the fact that in Denver, I think we had, and other parts of the country as well, there was a real golden age of poetry slam and talent, and people that were taking it really seriously and pushing it in a way, and seeing it as a venue to try work out and enjoying the competition, but also not being completely stuck to it and ground to it. You know what I mean? I think people nowadays, it's gone back to the way it was maybe 30 years ago, where you can be one or the other. You can be a serious poet, or you can be a poet that does poetry slam. And at some point you grow out of it. And I think that's a shame. I think, I think we should be able to do both of those things.
Yeah. Well, when I think of you and I think of a few other people you've mentioned, I think of people that perform, very well. I mean, they perform in exciting, dynamic fashions, whether it's dynamically sad or dynamically happy or dynamically dynamic. But I also think of people who write very well. If I were to read this as a book, I would see a lot of structure. I would see a lot of interesting topics. I would be caught off guard at times. It's also quality writing, right? So I see a lot of what came out of Denver is kind of bridging of both, good writing, good performance, right?
Yeah, at least we could bullshit our way through it, one or the other, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but that doesn't just happen. I mean, like that, there you have to inculcate a culture of that happening, and kind of a standard of a certain standard, a certain, some kind of like thing that everyone kind of expects. So how did that come into being? How did kind of style develop in that time period in that city?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's a combination of different things. I think a big part of it, part of it has to do with the fact that people weren't afraid to slam. So you're kind of constantly being in a space where you're like, yo, I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna show up every week, or every month or so if it's Slam Nuba, and I'm excited to try things out. I'm excited to write new poems. I'm gonna keep writing these poems. I'm gonna do this poem because I want to beat this particular poet who's also my friend, or I want to impress them, or I have this idea. And I think that is the biggest thing, is not taking the competition seriously. And I think that's something that's changed in some ways culturally for the better across the entire world, as I think we're a lot more conscious of our own feelings and our own safety in spaces. And for better or for worse, because there are some really traumatizing things that can come out of that kind of art, and constantly pushing yourself with, because eventually unhealthy things can develop. And if you're not careful, if you're not aware of them, it can be tough. To say that there weren't a lot of like unhappy people that were using the microphone to exercise their demons would be, yeah, there was a lot of people that were doing that. And that's not always the best place to do it publicly, to scream out loud. For some people, it works really well. For other people, you're just re-traumatizing yourself again and again and again. You know what I mean? And I think also when poetry slam in the last 10 years or so of it, they gave rise to making money off of it, because people have figured out how to become performance poets, professional poets, for a long time. But I think there's been, because of the internet and because of the awareness of NACA or college booking agencies, I think there's been this huge swath over the past 12 years of people who make a living off of poetry. You know what I mean? And I think because it's been monetized, I think people are a lot more careful about it. I did an interview with the Button guys like 5 years ago, so some of my stuff, because I exist in a different country, the different scene, a different timeline out. So I might be outdated myself, but some of it, like talking to those guys, they're like, it was interesting to hear like the producer say, I can tell the difference between when someone's performing because they want to win the poetry slam, and someone's performing because they want a good video. And that's a very interesting thing. When it became monetized, more monetized, when it became more professional, when the idea of making a living off of it became more attainable, then it changed the way we approach it. I think in Denver, you're in an isolated city. You're basically a lighthouse in a prairie sea. You know what I mean? And your whole thing is like, we're just doing this for each other. So that maybe probably had a lot to do with it. Our whole world existed there. We had a lot of pride with being from Denver. We had a lot of excitement about it. We wanted to do dope shit and bring it to the National Slam. I think when Nuba came along, there was definitely rivalries that popped up between poets. And I think Nuba is just so much more professional and so much more glossy and cool. You know what I mean? And so, which is amazing. You know, it's an amazing thing. And I feel very proud to be on the ground floor of that, but also stepping out of it quickly, which is an important thing to note. You know, but I think that was uh, yeah, I think Nuba really kind of raised the stakes in that sense. You know, it even got to the point where like 3 or 4 years later, I feel like a lot of the Merc poets, some of the Merc poets tried to be very Nuba-ish, and it's like it doesn't work when Merc doesn't. Merc just needs to be like open and punky and kind of goofy, you know. So yeah,
Yeah, but you were able to make it to the college circuit. And I've always been really fascinated by the slam poets that are able to get onto the college circuit because I was on the college circuit
mm.
but I understood something pretty quickly that I needed to be the only poet in the room. Like I needed to be surrounded by academics on one side, organizers on the right, and be kind of a poet laureate of a cause, right? I
Yeah,
picked up on that really quick. Like that was the only way to like make money was to do colleges, and the only way to get colleges was to surround myself was really
mm.
to make myself a poet slash public intellectual. I'm very, very impressed by people who surround themselves with poets and are somehow selected to be the poet that is gonna get onto the college circuit. So how did you go about that?
Oh man, yeah, I don't luck. Or and hard work, yeah. But I don't know. It's interesting what you said because I feel like you really have, from everything I've noticed, from watching things from afar and seeing stuff pop up, you've carved out your own space, and I think that's an important thing to do. I think that proves that has a much long. There's a lot more longevity in that. There's a lot more purpose and there's a lot more control, and that's something that I admire personally, which I think is good. Which is something that I worked really hard to find on my own within Denver years later. There was a convenience in being able to make my living off of poetry gigs at universities and then with both groups and solo as time went on, and it became and what that meant is that when I was home I had the freedom to do whatever the hell I wanted, right? Because I didn't have to worry about making money. I'd be on the road for this amount of time over the years, and then after that I'd be home, so I could develop a youth program and do all that other stuff. Panama and I were, we used to perform as, we used to do group pieces and poems about video games and things like that. And that was the first jump off, is that we had a guy who saw us who was starting a college entertainment agency. I think there was a huge influx of NACA at the turn of the century. I think the 99, 98 Def Jam era, in moving into 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, I think there was a whole lot of poets that were moving into that space. And I think it blew the market out, and then it went away for a while. And people are like, you realize especially if you're doing it independently, the college entertainment circuit is like, it's a meat market, and it became really difficult for me to want to be a part of it. You know what I mean? Because there's all these, it does two things. Number one, it makes you realize like how low on the entertainment totem pole you really are, at least at the time. Like it's like stand-up comedians, jugglers, poets. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not an entertainer, I'm an artist, yo. It's like, no, you're an entertainer. You know what I mean? Can we fit you into a diversity club? Let's go. You know what I mean? And that's one of those things that always gets tough for me, and I think, yeah, like and obviously that's the kind of thing that doesn't always affect me, but watching, I'm sure there's something that's, I couldn't speak to it, but I'm sure there's something that's very empowering about being in spaces where you're speaking about your culture in a cultural club or a cultural space. And I'm sure there's other things where it gets really tokenizing at times.
Here's what I want to tell you. The road I took, so just so you don't feel whatever. I mean, I almost wrote an early memoir called "I Don't See Them Asking the Mariachis to help set up chairs."
Yeah, that's good.
All across the world. It's not until you have a name that you're not blowing up balloons. I mean, it doesn't change. It's the same world all over.
No, I was having this conversation where I had Susie Q came into my my workshop the other day, or one of the workshops I run here. She zoomed in for it, and we were talking about that, and she made this comment about sometimes you're performing in front of seven. That's what the college entertainment industry does too. Sometimes you're performing in front of 700 people, and then at like the welcoming ceremony for new students, you're or whatever, your keynote somewhere, but then the next day it's noon in Minot, North Dakota, and you're reading poems in a lunchroom at a bunch of kids who don't know why you're there. The kid that booked you at the conference isn't in uni anymore, and suddenly you're yelling at this dude who's just trying to eat a sloppy joe, and he's like, why are these angry men in my lunchroom? You know what I mean? But here's the thing about that is that, so it can be a real ego shattering thing, but it can also really teach you how to work a room, which is something that I think often is lacking in a lot of like poets who are performers as well. They're used to performing in an environment where everybody is excited to see them, but to have to get off the stage and like really engage people, and that's something that we learned. Dynamic duo, man, we road dogged hard, you know what I mean? And we found ourselves in spaces, and then, you know, where you'd have to like, I'm going to get off the stage, I'm going to walk right up to you, I'm going to make you pay attention to me, I'm going to make you laugh, I'm going to charm you, now I'm going to tell you this serious thing, and you have to figure out all these things. And sometimes that means reading the same poem 30 times in a row, 30 nights on tour, right? Because you know that poem's a hit, but those kids don't, they've never seen you perform before. You know what I mean? So I think it's, you got to find a balance. So if you book all those shows and then you learn over the years, like, okay, well, I'm going to do a couple slam gigs. They're going to pay me $100 plus whatever I sell in merch, but that's going to help me feel better about myself, connect with my community, to grow artistically, to show off the things that I want to read, not always the stuff that I know I can. You know what I mean? And then you know, and I think there's a big balance to that. And I think we get too uptight or too concerned about certain things. And I think you have to remember that when you're a poet or you're a storyteller and you're a messenger of some kind, what you're doing is you're also bringing enlightenment or enjoyment or relief or something to somebody's day. And that's important. You know what I mean? That's a real service. So like, if you get too up in your head about, oh, I just need to read my new work off a page and, you know what I mean, I need people to take me seriously, I think that's good. That's fine. And you can do that. But I think a good balance is necessary,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So your work is really strong. It's really moving. It's really impactful. A lot of the things you've done. I'm sure you have people come up to you and tell you that they were they were moved and they felt something, right? And
Some,
I'm sure it happens. So I posed this question to several poets now. So you're up there, you're performing. You may feel whatever you feel, but you've written things in a certain way, so it'll escalate here, it'll calm down here, it'll do this here, it'll do that. It's craft, right? You may not necessarily feel what you're saying. You kind of maybe having an outer body experience, thinking about what you're gonna have for dinner, right? But the audience, because it's composed well, because it's performed well, they're listening to what they're saying, and they're also re-experiencing their own life, experiencing something similar to what you're saying, right? So if it's done well and it's written well, that's what's going to happen. They're going to think about their own lives, and so they're going to want to talk to you afterwards, and they're bringing with them the weight of their entire life, right? And you maybe not ready to receive that, but you also don't want to be whatever. So how do you handle those situations?
I would like to say that, as much as they bother me, well, James Metallica, right? So James Hetfield, no, it wasn't. He was Jason. What's his name? Who's the bassist during the Enter Sandman days? He left.
Jason before Alex Trujillo.
Jason. Yeah. So he did this thing because he would always, no matter at the end of the show, he would stand out afterwards and talk to every single fan as they wanted him to go away. I saw an old school metal band that I was into when I was a kid named Helmet. I saw them perform here in New Zealand. It was very exciting for me. And because I'd never seen them live. They broke up before I had the chance, and they got back together. And so anyway, Paige Hamilton, who's basically the band, he's sitting there afterwards talking to every single person, high-fiving them, handshaking them. Nathan, great dude from Flogging Molly, who I've been fortunate enough to talk to a few times now. He does the same thing. He'll sit outside of the show and talk to every single person and shake their hands, And I think there's something that's really amazing about that, because I'm sure those guys get hit with stories that are just as deep or just as intense, even more so, like, yo, your music saved my life, or I was going to do this terrible thing one time, or things like that, or you helped me through a terrible adolescence or a trauma or something like that. And I think there's something about that at least to me, if someone came out to see you, you try your best to talk to them as much as you can. Now, here's the reality. Are there times where I've been totally drained and I just don't want to talk to a single human being, especially because it's poetry, especially because there's no block, there's no like music to help carry the emotion. I'm just by myself on a stage telling you about some real shit. No, there's times where I've definitely like been not motivated to talk to people. But if there's one thing that I would say is it's just to remind myself of pretty much exactly what you just said, that, this means something to them. I also say, hey, send me an email and I'll follow up. And that's something I try really hard to do if I find myself in that space. But that seems like a world away from me now these days, man. I don't do shows as much as I used to, So, yeah.
You don't know what you got till it's gone. All right, so now you are, as someone once said, you are now in New Zealand. So how did this happen?
So my partner is a really amazing poet named Carrie Rosinski, and we came out here as friends. We met some poets. We really enjoyed it. Our relationship started here. And then we came back out again just to visit again, just to meet people and hang out. And then we kind of had in our head that we wanted to come out for an extended period of time because we just had so much fun and it meant so much to us in our life. And then very privileged and very lucky somehow or another, we've been here for 5 years now, and very involved in the poetry community here. And I do a lot of the same like kind of work I did in Denver, but I work for someone else. Like I have a salary. It's great. I'm very fortunate. You know what I mean?
How'd you meet Carrie?
We met originally. I heard about her in the Boston scene,
Mhm.
and then because I used to visit Boston a lot and the East Coast a lot because I did that. I was on the New Eurekan team. That was the last slam team I was ever on. Was the New Eurekan in 2010, and I heard she was really badass, and she was one of the only poets I knew that had a video up on YouTube at the time, which was very exciting. And but yeah, I thought she was cool. I thought she would never want to talk to me. But yeah, when I found out I was going to New Zealand, it was kind of on accident because I ended up getting booked for this tour in Australia, and they, by miscommunication, thought I was going to be in New Zealand. And so I was like, they were like, well, the only thing we budgeted for is a plane ticket. So you can buy your own plane ticket and take the cost out to come to Australia if you want. You know what I mean? But what we paid for is a flight from Auckland to here. And I was like, holy crap. So I knew, because I had talked to Carrie briefly over time, so we kind of became friends. She hid me once when I didn't want to do a cipher at a room at iWhips in 2010. That was a really sweet moment. So there was a cipher going on, and I get really scared in ciphers, and I don't like them. I like listening to them. I just don't like being called out. And so when everybody came in to do the cipher, I jumped behind a bed and I hid there for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And she helped me out, and then she let me know when I could leave. And so yeah, we started kind of becoming friends after that. And then she had told me in passing that she had been to New Zealand, and that she had a working holiday visa, and that she hadn't used it correctly and wanted to go back for like she could use it for another like 6 months or something. And I was like, okay, cool, well, let's go back to New Zealand. When I kind of explained the situation to her, and she's like, I've never been overseas like that, and it would be really nice to go with someone. And so yeah, and then I went over there, started thinking I kind of like this girl, went to Australia for the tour, was there for 4 weeks with Mahogany, Brown, and Jive Poetic. And then largely based on Jive's urging, he said, go back there.
Yeah.
And how you feel? And that was
So,
it.
so there's a wide array of different people that are kind of like, going to access this or see it maybe. I mean, not everyone's involved in the poetry scene, and doesn't be viewing this. So can you tell them a little bit about the New Eurekan?
New Eurekan is the most legendary poetry venue in the world, in my personal opinion, my humble opinion, and the humble opinion of millions of others. It is a legend. My first poet that I used to read and perform poems from, or that I used to hear the voice of a lot, was a guy named Miguel Pinheiro, who I just loved to death, and who went on to be one of the founders of the New Eurekan. So to me, I always had this like dream. I had two dreams. One was to bring, when I started doing poetry slam and I learned about the poetry scene, I had two dreams, and one I never told anybody about because it didn't make any sense. And one of mine was to be on the New Eurekan Poetry Cafe slam team, just because all the poets would come through it, just the vibe of it. When I got to perform there in 2006 for the first time, it was just magic. I remember someone being like, you see the line around the block. People start lining up at like 6 p.m. Or, doors don't open till 10, and like, and just seeing the magic of it. And don't ignore the balcony, perform for the balcony. You know what I mean? It's just one of those absolute moments. And it's such a New York thing where it's just like, you have to commit. It doesn't matter. You take that stage, you have to commit. You cannot pull back. You know what I mean? And so it was just such an amazing moment to get to perform there and do that. And anyway, so the back of my head was always like, yo, it'd be great to be on that team and to get to be part of some history like that. So my goal was to win a championship for Denver, and my other one was to be on the New Eurekan. And then somehow magically, when I was touring a lot, and it was during a time I was doing a lot of solo touring over the East Coast, towards the end of 2009, moving into 2010, I was friends with Mahogany, and I'd be like, hey, yo, I'm going to be in town. What's going on at the New Eurekan? She's like, do you want to slam? And I was like, sure, I'd love to slam. And so the first time I did a slam and I qualified. So the way that the slam works is you either have to win a Wednesday open slam, and then you get to go into that, or you get invited to slam on a Friday night if they think you can do well enough. And so I got invited to slam, and I slammed, and I won. It was very exciting. So it's like, well, if you're going to be in town any of these dates, you could do a Friday semifinals. And I was like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, and if you win the semifinals, you go on to the Grand Slam. And I was like, ooh, so why not? I was spending a lot of time in New York. I really enjoyed it, and so the next time I had the chance, I went and I won a semifinal. So I made it into the Grand Slam, which was really exciting. I was like, crap, I have a chance to do this. At least getting to do the Grand Slam would be amazing. And if you don't win the Grand Slam, what happens is you get thrown into a series of runoff slams the next month. It's a very complicated system. So I knew that if I went into the runoffs, I wouldn't necessarily have the ability to go out for the team. You know what I mean? Because like I live in another city. I'm still running my youth program. There's all these things that are going on. You know, it'd be really difficult for me to do. And yeah, so I did the Grand Slam, and somehow magically in a slam off against Jamal St. John of all friggin' people, who's the winningest poet in Nuyorican history. We both read new poems off page, and mine won. So I won the Nuyorican Grand Slam in 2010. So it was like a dream come true. It was never anything I ever expected. We came in second at the National Poetry Slam that year, behind the home team, St. Paul, which is an incredible team. It was an incredible team. So yeah, but it was quite a run. So and I think after that, I was like, yo, I've done all the things that I want to do for myself competitively. I'd been on 8 teams in a row. You know, I was getting kind of old and kind of over it. But that allowed me to keep coaching and doing other things like that. So,
Yeah. Again, for our audience who might not be involved in the world of poetry, can you tell us a little about Mahogany Brown?
Mahogany Brown is the I I'm hesitant to speak right now because I know she knows that she can hear me wherever she is. Mahogany Brown is the absolute queen of all things poetry and performance poetry like related. She's a community worker. She is a coach. She is a producer. She is a kind of person that puts other people on consistently works for the community, and also writes incredibly dope poems. And she's also the kind of person that's steady. You know what I mean? She's a mountain. She's always just like, I'm going to keep climbing and I'm going to keep doing my thing. And this is how you operate. And this is how you bring others with you. So it's, when someone says, don't worry about those people, like Mahogany took that advice very early on, and Mahogany doesn't worry about other people except for the people that she cares about. And she worries about people in the sense that she cares about them, but there's no distractions to her. You know what I mean? And because of that, she's able to really build things for other people as well. So Mahogany Brown's an incredible poet, author, publisher. Definitely check her out. Yeah. 1,000.
So you mentioned earlier the youth program. So you were involved in training in the coaching of Brave New Voices in Denver. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what Brave New Voices is? And yeah, so tell us.
So Brave New Voices is the largest international youth poetry slam festival in the world. I think Without in the Bomb in Chicago, I think is a bigger slam, and I think there's some of the ones in Europe have gotten really big too. But I think as far as an international festival, as far as attendance as a general rule, even if there's been a bad year here or there, I think as a general rule, like it has the largest audience and things like that. And so it's kind of like a big national poetry slam for people from ages 13 to 19. And it kind of over the years, because it was developed as like a youth empowerment platform, I think kind of went on to do that. And it kind of jump started a lot of that same idea of using spoken word poetry as a youth engagement tool or as an empowerment platform, if it's done well. And so I started visiting classrooms even before I was slamming, and kind of going. I had an older poet in the Denver scene named Barb Tess, who's amazing, who's like the Denver poetry grandma. She was an alternative high school teacher, and she brought me into a school when she found out that I had been to the same kind of school. Like I graduated from, it was a challenge school, 17 to 21-year-olds, and so a lot of these kids kind of like mimicked the same kind of background that I had. It was still suburban, but it was the kids that's who had a lot of issues in those spaces, and some of them had gone to jail and come back or things like that, and so she had me come in and read poems, and I kind of told my story and read the poems, and that was like an amazing moment for me, and it ended up being something that I enjoyed doing a lot more, kind of on the DL than doing anything else, and then so at some point there was a young poet who used to hang around the Denver scene. There's a couple of them, and they started this youth poetry slam, and it was actually started through a high school, and they wanted to send a team via the high school to B&V, but B&V had a rule that you couldn't be a high school team. You have to be like high schools feed into your program. And so they ended up asking to do it through the Mercury Cafe. And then they asked if myself and someone else wanted to be the coaches for it. And I was very excited about that. I had no idea what was going, but I think whatever reason, the young people really liked me. And also I was really young myself. I was just a bit too old to be a coach or to be at B&V. And so I coached the team. We had a great time. We finished middle of the pack. We went to New York. It was a lot of fun. And we kind of realized that we could be doing a lot more with it and reaching more kids. And the thing dawned on me that if I had done that, if I had something like that or a platform where I felt comfortable to read my poems outside of parties, if I would have discovered the Mercury Cafe earlier and it was full of people that were my age and my demographic, and you know what I mean, I would have saved myself a hell of a lot of trauma, I think. You know what I mean? A lot of the anger issues that I had growing up, which were massive, for me. It got me into a lot of trouble. And so I was like, oh, well, let's try to make this something bigger than what it is. And because I was doing the poetry full-time thing, it was easy for me to leverage my time to help kind of try to build a program. And so, yeah, we started, the kids all voted. They voted me in they actually did a vote to vote me in as the program director. And then we did a vote for the name, and the name that came up was Minor Disturbance. And people really thought that was great. And so we ran with that, and we started the Minor Disturbance Youth Poetry Slam, aka the Minor Disturbance Youth Poetry Project. And so we ran workshops and things like that in schools, but it was always very like, skin of our teeth. But honestly, because we didn't really need a lot, and then we got a really amazing fiscal agent who would back us up. Anyway, long story short, yeah, our whole goal originally was just to send a team to BNV, but then it developed into a lot of other things: Denver Poet Laureate, Youth Poet Laureate, other programs and things like that. I think the program kind of got swallowed up after I left Denver, which is fine. I think things change. I think I left it to some really amazing people that were alumni of the program, and I think they ended up moving on, and then it kind of like moved to where it was. But yeah, so in our time we did great. In 2010, the team was featured on the Brave New Voices documentary on HBO. I think we made final stage from 2009 to 2015. And I think we're the only team to ever make final stage that many times in a row. We won it in 2012 and 2013. So just out of competitive stuff, you know what I mean? The things that Minor Disturbance did was for Slam we did pretty well with it. And a lot of those poets have gone on to be really incredible professional poets. Tolu Obewole, Amal Kassir, Kevin Cantor. These are all poets. They're like really amazing. The list goes on and on. If I think about awesome poets that came from that program, the things they've gone on to do. Special shout out to my friend Steven Garcia, who's like an amazing dude who actually told me something's amazing. I knew him since he was 15. He always went by Steven. And then 3 years ago, he told me, no, my name is actually Stefan. And I'm like, then how come everybody calls you Steven? He's like, it's just one of those things, and I never corrected them. And so, yeah. So
right.
Also, fuck you, Stefan. But anyway.
Yeah. But get it right.
Get it right.
Get it right. Right. All right.
Yeah.
This Brave New Voices was on HBO. So what was that like? What was it like surrounded by cameras and trying to like teach people shit?
I don't know. It was wild. Ours wasn't the original miniseries. They just filmed the finals. So if you made the finals, you'd be on it, and then they did interviews. So I think it saved us quite a bit, But yeah, it was a bit weird, And also, I think BNV as a general rule had a pretty negative effect on the Youth Speaks community. Maybe not Youth Speaks in general, but the Brave New Voices community. I think it changed what kids were targeting and what people wanted, and the behavior and the stakes in a big way. Instead of it just being a safe space for young people to gather from across the country and tell their stories, as safe as the space can be, it became professionalized. It became monetized. It's the same thing, which is good. I'm not going to shame anybody for making a living off of it or wanting to make a living off of it. It is what it is, but it does change things. It changes what people want. Yeah.
Right Bloody.
What about it?
Tell us about it.
I've never been on Right Bloody, bro.
You're not?
No. A lot of people think I was. I was on penmanship. I was on Mo's.
My fucking Google is not serving me well.
No, I was I think I was in a couple Right Bloody anthologies, maybe just one.
Some anthologies. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I do pretty good with the anthologies. I do bad with general publications or journals, but I do great with anthologies. But yeah, no, I was on penmanship books. I had two books published. The first one was Denver, which is a one-off illustrated book on Punch Drunk Press, which is not Punch Drunk, Fast Geek Press. My homie Charlie Fasano, who is the most amazing punk rock poet you will ever meet. Lovely man. He started a press, and yeah, he put that off. But he's published like anthologies full of like all kinds of cool people, and a lot of like old punk rock guys. They're pretty famous. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're like, I write poems on the side. You want to put my book out? And he'd be like, so I did that, and then my second book was on penmanship, which was out of Brooklyn. It was Mahogany Browns.
Okay.
imprint, and that was Coyotes. Yeah.
I'm going to explain to you my mess up here because I'm very very embarrassed. It's that damn John Sands. Like when I put in your name to Google, whatever it is, because you did something with John Sands and he was published there. So that was
Yeah, John and I used to tour a lot and do a lot of shows. Oh wait, we got a
yeah.
question from Alejandro.
Slash I don't know what's going on here. Okay.
How far do you think the Nuggets would have made it in the playoffs this year had it not been for COVID-19? Tell them they would have made it to. Shut up, Alejandro. They would have made it to. They would have made it to. They would have. They would have made the Western Conference Finals. I really believe it. Especially with the draw that we had at that time, I think we could have easily made the. Not easily. I think we would have had a fight for it, but I think we could have made the Western Conference Finals. Yeah. That's one thing I'll brag about. I got to write a poem for the Denver Nuggets. I got commissioned to write a poem for the Denver Nuggets.
Tell us about that.
It was cool. I did a poem about Denver with some of my friends and we did a video out of it. We became friends because we made the video. So it's just a poem we want to do for TEDx Mile High. It was a poem, like a love poem to Denver. And actually, there's a lot of problematic stuff that's involved in it, and that I could probably talk about later with like some of the gentrification issues in Denver and things like that. So I love that video, but I also have a lot of, it goes very much against it doesn't go against, it got used as propaganda in a sense for a lot of things that I was against. But people liked it enough that the Denver Nuggets marketing team noticed it, and they're like, "Yo, do you want to do one of those videos for us?" And we were like, "Hell yeah!" So it was like a childhood dream to get to do that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, wow. So let's see. We got I think 3 dreams come true in this interview.
Dude, you just gotta lower your level of dreams. You know what I mean? Like, you can have a dream come true every day. You're like, what my dream is today? My dream is to make some really amazing potato and leek soup because I saw this dude do this video. I'm gonna do it. I made that dream come true last week, and it was delicious, dude. Matt, I just finished it today. It was so good.
That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Low expectations.
I had guava for the first time in my life because I just happened to have a guava tree outside my window. It was amazing. That's a dream come true.
Accomplishable dreams are the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, that's true.
Man, I'm thrown off by the fact that I messed up. So
don't worry about it.
I apologize.
I'm impressed that you know anything, Matt. So it's flattering you did your research. It's awesome. So yeah.
So tell us more about penmanship and what it was like to be published on that press.
It was great. Mahogany's very supportive, and the book looked very beautiful. I feel like I had too many people giving me suggestions in the editing field, and I should have just gone with the original idea of how to edit that book that I was given by Mahogany. So I think there was a really awesome dude. There was some really awesome people that worked on it though, like Rico, Frederick, and Omar Holman did some work on it, and Sean Conlon. So a lot of people took a look at that book and made it very pretty. But when I look at it now, I was like, oof, could have done that way better. And I think that's the thing that ends up happening. And I think your first book is so important when you're moving into that kind of realm. I think also I would have pushed to have the book put into more places, you know what I mean? Like try to get into festivals and things like that. So I'd be very keen to do another book someday. But I think that first one, I was just so exhausted and so upset. I was also going through a lot of personal stuff at the time. So I think it kind of drained me a bit. Writing is a physical act. I think that's something that we forget. That writing is actually like it's an exercise. You know what I mean? And if you don't keep exercising, the exercise gets harder and harder and harder. And so there's talking about John Sands. That's one thing that he used to talk about. He's like, it is. You have to physically prepare yourself for it. And for me, who's a person who can be deeply unmotivated to do anything, writing can be a trip. But once I get on it, I love it. Once I'm on it, once I'm starting to write and I'm in the mood, then I feel great. But if I stop doing it for a while, it really, yeah. And so I think working on a book sometimes, I think during that period of my life, I was just too tired. You know what I mean? And I waited too long to put the book out anyway. Like, I got the offer to put the book out like 3 years before I did. You know what I mean? So I should have actually like spent that time better. But that's one thing I would say is that if you find yourself something that was pretty that I would like to say that I'm not sure I ever followed, but I wish I did, is that the reason why you make a living off of your art is so that you have more time to make it. You know what I mean? So you find yourself in that position, that very generous position, that very fortunate position, then do it. Take advantage of the time that you have. you'll find your time to party and meet people and try to impress people by saying you're a professional poet later. That'll always happen. So make sure that you spend your time making the art.
Yeah. So you are a published author. You've made 8 slam teams. You made your dream team. You led your team, your beloved team from your home city. You're one of the driving forces to take them to a championship. You've coached a very successful youth program in slam. You got to write a poem for the Denver Nuggets. You met what appears to be the love of your life, the apple of your eye through poetry. You've accomplished all these things, and yet this reoccurring theme keeps coming up in your story, which is that you have these doubts. You feel like you doubt. So what? And yet, you find yourself in another country, another part of the world, being able to yet again make a career out of poetry, something that most people can't even accomplish. And most people aren't fortunate enough, or a combination of being lucky and driven enough to be able to do in one place, right? And you actually have relocated yourself and be able to do it a second time. All the world would, the universe would point towards a body of evidence that you should not experience doubt, and yet you still do. So can you? But yet you wouldn't have all these things would not be true of you if you did not push through your doubt.
Yeah. Everything that you want is on the other side of fear. I don't know who said that, but everything in this world that you want is on the other side of fear. That doesn't mean throw yourself off a building. It's a true thing. Do you know who said that?
I don't know who said that.
Yeah, I can't remember. Somebody smart said that.
I can Google it, but I
yeah,
don't know.
Yeah. I didn't know that this show was about getting Ken on here to make him feel ashamed for all of for his like.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's incredible. No, but I want to know what advice do you have for people who feel like, oh my God, I can't do this, and you still do it. What advice do you have for people who
Oh man, I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel like if I was just chatting with someone really quickly, I could come up with something smart about it. But I think that is one thing I would say over and over again is that, there's no great line in the world that's going to stop a feeling from fucking you up. There's no perfect poem. There's no logic. There's nothing out there that's going to, the only way that you're ever going to like stop your feelings from drowning you is to swim in them. Is to learn to like accept that those feelings are going to come, and if you're not ready to do that or to accept this feeling or that other feeling, to be willing to forgive yourself and float until you figure it out. And I think that is the hardest thing, is learning how to forgive yourself as time goes on. Forgive yourself for the poem you didn't write. Forgive yourself for the slam you didn't win. Forgive yourself for spending too much time in poetry slam. Forgive yourself for, and I think forgive yourself is a heavy term and a heavy word. I think it's probably more like, let it go. And I think that's, and then taking stock again. Yeah, no, I'm a deeply fortunate man, and I need to recognize that continuously. But I think if there wasn't a question of doubt, if there wasn't a question of wanting to find the things that scare you, for wanting to push through them, then I wouldn't get to do a lot of cool stuff. You know what I mean? Because if I had never gotten the guts to get up on a stage for the first time and read a poem as badly as I wanted to, then I never would have done any of those things. You know what I mean? If I didn't take that blind random flight to New Zealand, you know what I mean? Because it was the only way I was going to get to Australia, then I never would have met Carrie, Yeah. I think everything you want in this world is on the other side of fear. Forgive yourself if you're not willing to walk through it at this day.
Yeah. I realize I put you on the spot a little bit there, but that answer.
No, that's a huge question. That's a great question. That's actually, that's way better than your average, like, how did you get into poetry slam question? That's big.
I am listening to you.
What's that?
I said I am listening to you as you speak.
No, you're good. You're good, man.
Yeah.
What are you up to? What are you doing besides these interviews? Are you doing work? Are you doing shows still?
I will tell you what I'm up to after this with these interviews. But I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to know ahead of time because I didn't want it to affect you. But but also, and that was before I knew anything about the, whatever. I mean, I don't want anyone to know, actually.
Yeah.
I should stop talking about that. I've actually been able to get on the radio. I've been pushing my book, Mowing Leaves Grass, right here.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great title.
I always believe in, if you're gonna pick a fight, like, don't be a bully. Pick a real fight. You know what I mean? Like, so
Mm,
like this is the bard, this is the guy, this is the man in US poetry. He's also someone that said, "What does miserable, inefficient Mexico do with the grand mission of people in the New World with noble race?" He's a big proponent of manifest destiny. So my attitude is that Walt Whitman was very
yeah,
talented. I'm also very talented. Fuck him. So like that's
yeah.
kind of the marketing of that book. So I'm doing a series of interviews. Tony Diaz, who was a big proponent of when the books got banned in Tucson.
Mm,
He was the big media guy. Actually, he was kind of number one guy, and he was doing this thing called Libro Traficante when he was like bringing in like the banned books into Arizona. Like,
mm.
and so he's going to interview me about the book and the meanings of
Oh,
it.
cool.
Yeah, and then Rick Nahara is actually going to interview me. I think he's interviewing me as part of the Latino thought leaders. So it's like
Okay.
last week was Urea, this week's Edward James Olmos, and next week's me.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's who I am now. So
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah, fuck, that's great. That's great. No, and that's what I said. Your hustle has been nonstop, and I like agitators. You know what I mean? I don't like bullies. I like agitators. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I like listening. And I've been, that's one thing I would say I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by some incredible thinkers and people that are, that are agitators, and oftentimes people in the room that are much smarter than me. And I think that's the best place to be. If everybody in the room is smarter than you, you're going to learn something.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and that's
Well,
cool.
but I mean, like, this isn't about me. It's about you. I've always been a big fan. I mean, your work is really stellar.
I appreciate that.
It's really
Yeah.
exceptional. Really
Thanks,
exceptional.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. Once, yeah, I remember, from time thinking about Denver and like the history and some of the things that I love. It. I know you posted that uh, this article once about Corky Gonzalez
Mm.
and like such an incredible figure. And one of the things that Denver never talks about, which is deeply unfortunate, unless you go to a space. Like I feel like that's a cultural hero that needs to be celebrated. You know what I mean? And it's not something that ever really is.
Yeah. Well,
Although the history is very complicated, but yeah.
we had Hoser on, and we talked about that, and
Oh, cool.
I had Alejandro on. I keep saying we like I got a team. I had Alejandro, and I've had Alejandro, and I've also had Hoser. So
Oh, cool.
it occurred to me that I had Paulie, so it really occurred to me that I should have you. I don't really know Dio that well, but I'll reach out to him anyways.
Oh, yeah,
And I
do it.
don't know Panama at all, so I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. I don't know, but yeah, reach out to people. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure they'd be keen to talk about it. I think, yeah, man, Hoser, what a force of nature. Alejandro's up in Portland now too, though. Hey, that's probably always asking me about the Nuggets. I bet because the Trailblazers.
Hayden.
Um, cool. But yeah, legend that guy. Alejandro's
Yeah.
amazing. Um, cool, man. Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. So, are there anything you want to plug? Any final words? Anything you want to like on the way out? Want people to really be aware of and know?
Um, Not just support your local scene. And I got, you told me to bring it, so let me see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah.
I was published in an anthology of New Zealand and Australian poets,
Mm-hmm.
spoken word poets, called Solid Air. Oh, here it is.
This is what I'm talking about, Ken Arkind. You are living a rarefied life. You're living a rarefied life. You are now an anthologized Australian New Zealand poet.
I know. I think some people saw it and they're like, "What?" But there's an incredible collection of poets in here from all over. And who David Stavanger and Anne Marie Tafiu put out like a pretty amazing. They curated it. It's even got Taika Waititi has a poem in this,
Wow.
which is pretty interesting because definitely not a performance poet, but a pretty amazing dude.
Do you ever slam in a New Zealand or Australian? Just be like,
No,
that's not a poem. This is a poem.
no, I run slams because I think that was the thing for
Yeah.
me. Being community minded was that like when Carrie and I moved here, we're like we're not going to compete. We're going to set up stages for other people.
Not
You know what
good.
I mean? Because and there's poets here that would beat anybody in the world. You know what I mean? In a competitive sense. But I think at the time there was this idea of like making sure that we were. One thing I would say is that I'm for the most part of my life, I'm proud to say that I never walk into a space that I'm not invited into. I don't always know what I'm going to do when I get in there, but I think it's a really important thing about politeness and about recognizing yourself in a space is to to do that. And so I think once you're there, you should make sure that you're helping other people out and curating spaces and things. It'd be great to slam again someday, but I'm not sure when that's going to be.
So
Yeah.
you said before we close out, you said the only way uh, the only way to something to stop yourself from drowning in your feelings was to swim in them.
Yeah.
You where you said that? That was
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was a good one. That was a good one.
That
Yeah,
was a good one,
but
man.
there's a caveat. There's a caveat to that one to make sure that to be okay that sometimes if you're not feeling up to it, it's okay to float as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to not pressure ourselves to make ourselves have to do that because some people aren't ready to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you for the quote. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Do some of
That's
that.
cool.
I don't know. Put it together a series of other words.
Make a poem. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. All right.
Yeah, no.
We've been joined this hour by Ken. Don't leave. I'm gonna turn this thing off. Don't leave, Ken. We've been joined by this hour by Ken Arkind. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Been a huge fan for many years, and thank you, Ken, for joining us.
Sorry, man. Thank you very much, Matt. Be safe.
Don't leave. Don't leave.